What's up? Welcome to the American Gods Show. We're talking, well, it's not the show, but we're talking about the show. My name is Kari Lane. I'm joined by my awesome co-host. This way, there we go. Flobo's in the house.
What's up? I'm always wrong with which direction to point.
It's
I'm just doing one
it's
of
so
these.
weird, yeah. If
Me.
anybody's watching, is like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, it's like a mirror. Yeah.
Right. You're actually this
Anyway.
way on my
Yeah.
thing.
I'm like, no, yeah, that's
I'm
okay.
so glad to be here. We're talking episode 4. We're halfway through the season, Kari. Can you believe it?
That is crazy, but yeah, kind of, because this show just seems to zip by and goes by slowly at exactly the same time.
Deep.
Yeah.
The war coming, we don't know.
Right? Oh my goodness, yes. Episode 4, The Unseen. So what do you think of episode 4, the halfway mark of the show?
Wasn't as strong as last week, but there's a lot of things to like about it. Again, my problems with the first 2 episodes, it felt like everything was happening at a snail's pace. Pace is the same, but now we got some layers in there. We have a bunch of B plots and C plots, so I was thoroughly entertained. We get to see more of Purgatory just for a little bit, which is pretty awesome. And Shadow had to make a decision, which I thought was pretty cool too. So it's kind of like, what's his mind, his spaces, and all that.
I thought this one was a interesting episode, getting some more gods as well. So we had talked about other like countries' gods because we've seen some, but not really that much, all things considered. So it's really cool to get some of that involved and how different gods of different places would interact with each other, or at least different. They're at different places now, but they're similar, close-ish in origin. So that was like, ooh, how do we intersect all these different people?
It's a question for you though. The intro this week having almost like a Aesop fable vibe to the United States. So what's your thoughts about that?
Oh, I loved it. I like the comment of that we as like the American idea has betrayed their creator, which makes sense because they wrote, this was a country made for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But we all know that was not written including everyone.
Right.
Exactly. That's reflected those who were writing it. There were a lot of people left out of that thought process. So I like the more take a step back of that was not a good intention because it didn't include everybody. And also that it is now the altar of commerce, which is totally true. Makes sense for sure. Because I think even now too, that reflects our culture, which we've seen in internet and stocks taking over and not, and wins and losses of just how it is. The money has such an influence on everything that I'm like, oh yes. I was like, altar of commerce, not writing that down. I was like, yes. Yeah. And then also even reflecting today, we, that, you are better as a group. The individual is important, but it is the group that will get something done. So I was like,
yeah, it was a lot to take away from. And it's always surreal, not in a good way or a bad way, but it feels very detached when someone surmises where you're from or your neighborhood from a very outside perspective. Like I watched a documentary about a guy that went to New York for the first time and hated it. It was interesting to hear that. But to see the United States being told as like this mythical land in Middle Earth, but it's actually living in it, it's pretty cool. And there was a lot of things that talked back to last season with the money episode, right? The greatest story ever told or greatest lie ever told. And so, yeah, I had the same kind of feels that you had.
Yeah, and I like seeing the different African gods as well, and it makes sense too because we had seen a little bit, example Nancy, of people bringing their gods with them here, even if they didn't come here by choice. So it's like, oh, cool. I was happy to see these other gods and how they come back again in the episode. So I was like, ooh, who are these people? And then like, how are they connected? And it just, I'm like in a real world thinking about just history. It does suck that whoever God you prayed to, it did not happen in your lifetime. And that just sucks. Oh. Like it, in the like most simplistic boiled down terms, I'm like, that just sucks. That it's maybe multiple generations after you, there's change. Yeah. But just to think back, I'm like, because it's like, so did praying to your God's work? Because not really. It's like,
Not to compare it though, but I remember when I was in college, the school had corralled us all in the room to ask about what we wanted to have in a student union, and they built it the year after I left, and I was like, oh, it should have been me. But I guess it's some kind of solace in knowing that you are a direct product of your descendants and ancestors at the same time. You're kind of like in the middle, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And you can affect future generations for sure. So I really like that the show addresses stuff like that, and it is taking a step back to look at it, and so it's nice to have that perspective because it's less like the emotions of it or something. So that's more what you, the viewer, bring to the table of like your perspective on it.
Yeah, sure.
I liked it a lot. Then we have Laura, speaking of gods and afterlife, Laura in purgatory. I thought her card looked kind of red, and they said, red cards come up to the front. Maybe it's more of an orange, but I don't know. Did you notice that at all?
I thought it was an orange card from last week's thing. But yeah, it was. I would say this episode, it was like a red or orange. I was like, maybe it'd be a hybrid thing. Like maybe you should try and get up another time. But so when it didn't happen, I go, okay, definitely orange. Most definitely orange.
Yeah. Because then I thought she was hiding it because then she like tucked it behind her pamphlet. So, but she seems to want to get out of there. So that just felt a little weird for me.
Yeah.
But,
maybe someone lit it wrong.
Yeah, or something. I was a little bit ambiguous. I liked her leprechaun love memories. I was like, aww, like the music playing over it and everything.
Wait, I know Valentine's Day is a few short weeks away, but if that's love, then no, thank you. Poor guy got his ass kicked.
I'm pretty sure we've talked about that they are a really well suited for each other pair. At least while she was undead. Because the thing is, I'd be curious what they would be like if she was normal human to his god powers. Because with her having essentially powers of the undead, they were kind of equal footing on how much you literally could hurt each other. And yes, I'm not saying this is a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
It's pretty toxic on a lot of levels. But they seemed better suited for each other than her and Shadow. Like her and Sweeney seem to be similar mindsets, similar, like the montage moment, they're both walking in the room. I feel like they're just on the same, wavelength that I was just like, it was cute to see her think of him more romantically. Yeah. Even if it was like these weird memories, it still had the music. And I was like, oh, Laura.
Just can imagine on like the Newlywed Game. Like, oh yeah, she had a coin and then it was true love after that.
Oh, she's like, he's the guy who killed me. And it's like, okay.
We're in love.
Yeah. So where was, then there's a moment, where was it? I wrote the song down. It was, Schweiger's Requiem of Balder. It was just like, we'll see where that comes out later because, the end of the episode with her, she's like, I'm going to go see somebody about a song.
Yeah, so it was like, kind of weird how she asked about it which makes sense, but she was like so impatient. I was like, this has to be a clue. Because why else would you go like, what is that song? What is that song? And this show is nothing, but what's the opposite of subtle? Blunt. Yeah. So I'm sure it's going to pay off eventually. Yes. Yeah. Requiem for Balder is my notes as well.
Yeah. And then also I loved Gilbert. I also love that actor. The cemetery, he just seems like such a nice presence, and he's just like, I liked his moment later with her, and he says I don't know what kind of a sign it is, but I take like meeting you as a sign of something out there. And she's kind of like, well, all right, fuck it. And he's like, it's fine. So I just thought their thing was cute.
It was very like a Christian rooted version of like Mr. Ibis. It was almost like the dead happens is gonna wipe down the table as meticulous, but he has that kind of gravitas, being like, oh, a naked woman. Here's my jacket.
Yeah, he's like, here you go. And
what a gentleman, that guy.
Yeah, right. I am curious though, because the bottle, like that essentially could bring her back to life, was mixed with his blood, with Sweeney's blood. So then I kind of wondered if that would, I don't know, somehow connect her to him, because it was her ashes, the liquid in the bottle, and then his blood. So I feel I almost had wondered if he would be like alive in her in a way, or his ghost would be stuck to her or something, because the fact that all those ingredients ingredients all mixed together makes me like there has to be connected. It would be almost like really nothing happened because
right, because remember she tried to use that directly on Sweeney, and it was like, you can't do that. But the prophecy was, it was what, blood plus love. So I mean, if Sweeney does not come back, we know that there's enough love in the air that it brought her back. But
she had the ashes though, so I'm kind of curious. Oh, and it was sad too. And like, if you've ever had a pet cremated, same idea of like, wait, this surmise of a life is like in this tiny little box.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that.
Because she's like, this is all of him, and if anybody gets your pet cremated, just so you know, it can come in a nice little box. And it is a really surreal moment of like, this thing was something you loved. Someone you love. So it's like,
I never thought about the gravitas of that moment, but now that you mention it, sure, you hold a live animal in your arms, and now it's passed away, and
and I love though that she got yoinked back out of that place too. It was like,
Space Mountain Man, woo!
I like that the guy in purgatory was like, did anybody else see that?
I wondered. I actually wondered for a second. I'm glad he said it. I was like, does anyone see if anyone leaves? Does anyone notice if you show up?
They'd be surprised. Yeah,
it's like the gym where everyone's dealing on their own life insecurities that they're just not looking at you.
Yeah. I think everybody's kind of in their own thing, but maybe the employees might. But I don't think that happens that often, so that's why it probably was like, hello, anybody else? So we have her at the end. Did you think she was seeing shadows glow?
I did actually didn't think about that.
I did for a second too. I
was like, wait a minute. Maybe she is, Why not? I do think that even though they're not on the same path anymore, it'd be kind of cool they were still that kind of like last flashes of their former union. So I'm willing to play ball if that's the case.
I think there's something going to be there, because even if it's not that, maybe it's less supernatural and godly, her connection to things, because that's a little more literal. Like, you saw a glowing light, but it turned out to be a truck stop, but it still was something that drew you to it.
Right.
So it's like,
It was a large sign. It was pretty large. It was huge.
Also, not a stereotype, but there's not that many truck drivers I've seen that are females. I love that it was a chick, kind of like truck driver vibe. I'm like, of course you find the one female truck driver probably at that stop.
Now that you mention it, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I thought it was like, hey, look, serendipitous, it's your path, go ahead and forward. But yeah, so random, a truck stop, huge sign going north. Maybe there's something lettered to that, because then I just had the thought, I'm like, please have some plot line where she's with some creepy truck driver. Not that truck drivers are creepy, but it's just this like somebody who could murder her or something like that. But it's like, no, it's a female that like I wouldn't be as concerned for her. So I'm like, let's see where this goes. Yeah. And she's heading to not Cairo exactly. That was funny. I'm like, Cairo, no, Cairo. Yeah.
So she's on her way.
At the same time, Kari, if you were like a zombie before, what could actually scare you? I was undead for a whole season.
I'm kind of curious how cautious she'll be now, because she's like, oh, I'm alive, and now she knows what's beyond in a way. She's seen a bit of it. That would she be a bit more hesitant, like, ooh, I don't want to, like,
would you,
or is she gonna forget that that's like a thing almost?
What about yourself? If you were in that version of purgatory and you came back from it, would you be more cautious or less cautious?
Both. I think it would depend on the situation. Like, things that are important, you maybe would be like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. But things that are maybe like it's not worth the risk, you might be a bit more like, Right. Well, it's like the idea, for example, if you've ever broken a bone, you know how painful that is, and then you really are less inclined to want to do something that would cause that kind of pain again.
Less inclined.
Just saying. But then there are those people that still, and they break many bones because they do a sport or they do a thing that puts them more in harm's way. So, I mean, it just depends on what kind of person you are. Well, what about you? Would you be like, all right, cool, caution to the wind, I've already done this rodeo once?
Kind of, I guess I'll eat a lot more because I can taste it then.
I like her eating the candy. It was like, oh, tasting things.
Yeah. I just forget about that. But like, as far as you're right, doing something extreme, I probably, understand that I don't want to wait in an office any more than I have to. So
yeah. Or that too. She would be like, I don't want to waste time doing things she doesn't care about. Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Then we have, I was like, speaking of not wasting time, we have Shadow with Technical Boy. And I really like him just like, well, what'd you do? Shadow telling him. And I like that, it's like they figure it out, that Technological Boy is not the culprit here. Something had happened to him. I was like trying to read my notes and I'm like, so what we're down. I'm like, wait, what? So what went down? There we go. So what went down? So I'd see like, okay, well, I like that Shadow, has questions, but really has no time for Technological Boy's BS. And then it is kind of what we thought. It is Bill Sanders' people took her, his bodyguards. It's like, that's kind of what we were suspecting. Because they'll think she killed him. So it's real world. Like, I mean, she did kind of.
Yeah, I was like, really? They killed him?
Well, they're going to think she knows where the body is, which is true. But there's a lot of circumstances they don't know.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's something up with the glitches. But I do appreciate Shadow. Like, how much did you enjoy Shadow, like, smashing Tech Boy's head into the bar thing? And then also the, like, go lynch me, and he's like, I apologize for that. Apology not accepted.
Yeah, never accepted. Yeah, exactly. No, I think this is like the best road trip movie of the year, man. This is awesome. Look, Bill Quiz asked for Shadow, so that was always going to be a mystery, a side quest, if you will. And the best shows have side quests. You watch anime, you know how that goes. Entire seasons could be side quests. But working with Technical Boy, I'm glad they rewarded the fans and not just go, okay, sure. It was, no, I still don't like you, but you said you ate the phone. I guess we're stuck to each other. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? But yeah, it was a lot of fun that Shadow worked with them, but it wasn't subservient, or, you know what I'm saying? So I like the fact they found a balance for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, also now at this point, we have a god and a demigod working together. And I thought there was a moment, too, that we essentially see Shadow's superpowers because he, like, shoved Tech Boy in a way that felt more than regular human. So I was like, yay! Can we get more of that? Like, powers, do it. Yes. Because then we had when they kidnapped the security detail. So how do you explain to somebody what's more believable? There's gods or there's aliens? And I love that they went, it's aliens. Sure.
Yeah.
And then show them what you could do. I thought that was so funny.
I just feel like, man, if that were me, I probably would have passed out. If I saw this dude turn green and white and glitching in 3 different dimensions, I'll do whatever you want, man. Don't probe me, man. My orifices are mine.
We'll start with the reproductive organs. No!
I quit, yeah. And he gave up.
I'll tell you anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was like, here's all the information you need.
Well, it was nice, too, because how and for people watching, leave comments down below. Like the movies and shows where, okay, you have extra regular circumstances, like it's beyond what's going on. How do you explain to somebody who's not part of whatever you're doing that things are not regular? And it's so convenient when you can literally be like, here, I show you weird thing. Compared to I can't show it or I can't prove it, or like those plot lines. I'm like, oh, it's just so much easier. I'm like, here, literally, let me do something weird.
Yeah.
But then you also get the plots where the person goes, oh, it's just a trick of the light or something dumb. But I like this of Tech Boy could finally then I kind of wonder, I'm like, so is this his normal state? Because if this is like, show me what you can do, I'm like, is this relaxed, Like, is he focused to be what he is now? Or is it,
I thought it was more of a parlor trick, Like if someone says burp on cue, you can. But look, one thing I learned over the past 12 months is that sometimes you can have all the evidence in the world. People are just going to think what they think. And so I understand. So I totally get it now more than ever. It's like, whatever, Pro-productive workings, I quit.
Yeah. I thought that was I thought it was very funny. So she's in Hoboken. I kind of feel that they might get there in time. I feel that they're going to be able to do something because we don't see anything else with them per se. Do you think that they'll get there to rescue her?
I think so, especially, we'll talk about this in a second. Bilquis leveled up, if I could be so crass.
Yes.
And so I think we might see what that new invigorated Bilquis might look like. So I think they'll get there in time.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so Bilquis, we have her imprisoned. I am not alone. I choose to believe that. I have to believe that. Which I'm like, that is a very nice mantra for like anybody. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a good one. I'm not alone. I choose to believe that. I have to believe that because she's alone in this place. But then I love the tear that becomes the water, which becomes ocean. And I was like, woo, what do you think of
Yeah.
all that sequence and bit?
So this actually answered a question I wasn't thinking about for 3 years. It's how did Bilquis get to the United States? You know what I'm saying? Like you know about like Odin and go in the water and stuff like that, but I just like how did the Queen of Sheba decided to go to the New World? And well, the implication here is that she is a personification of some of the gods that came in the slave trade. That's confirmed. We had Emoja, Aye, and that's the water and earth, and of course Ocean, the Arisa, the beloved. So we're seeing that it's actually a title of lineage that Bilquis is the guardian of, going back to IRE, right? So I thought it was a cool little wrinkle on a character that doesn't retcon the character all that much, but gives it a little bit of depth that even underscores, again, how important people of color is for this country. What I thought was pretty awesome. So yeah, that scene I liked. There was a little bit of self-affirmation there. And I think, like, to your point, when I'm scared, it's cool to think about what you're here for, you know?
Yeah, I thought it was such a beautiful tie-in. I was like trying to find it. There we are. So we get her memories and that she's more of that and that connection to Ocean. And I felt it was also a way of how I'm like, oh yeah, well technically she's from Africa as well. Because it's like we're thinking back of like, well, where did Bilquis come from? And it's like, well, it makes sense that she would be connected to the other African gods and it's like I am we, it's all connected. Yeah. And it makes sense that they could, essentially come together. And it's just how also just like mythology, how gods can shift over time depending on which culture is praying to them and believing in them. So it's like, ooh, I loved it. And they're danced together. And then it was kind of comedic, but also kind of like fucked up. The guys on the outside were like, we broke her. And you're like, no, she broke you. She went beyond that point and didn't hear the torture. Like, well, I mean, it's like, unless you like heavy metal, but I like that she gets beyond that point and is like dancing and celebrating. And it's just the oranges and the golds and the peacock fans. I was like, oh, and the daggers, like all that was just like, mwah, loved it.
And it's funny how, we're a product of our experiences, and sometimes you could be in a situation where you're like down on luck, but we always look to our past, look to our ancestors, look to our cultural things. We're strong, like we are a product of our own memories and own experiences, and so that's something anyone can pull from, not necessarily an African American god. So for those watching, it's good for you.
Yeah. So I'm really curious of where that will lead next, and if this will help empower Bilquis more. Because I think she had been, in a way, isolated. But, not that she was sad in her isolation, because she was more, like, independent and doing her own thing. But it does seem like maybe she does need more support. So I'm glad that support has manifested for her, essentially.
I have a question.
Yes.
Given knowing what happened to both Bilquis and, we'll talk about this in a second, also Wednesday, did Shadow make the right decision, though, to pick Bilquis?
Of who to go help?
Yeah. Because Shadow got the call before the whole thing went sideways from Cordelia.
Well, I guess it depends on how much worship you want to look at how much worship each god is getting, because how much of that rechargeability exists. Odin, in a way, seems to have a bit of people going on for him in a way, but maybe not anymore. And then Bilquis has, it seems, far more individual, isolated worship rather than, a mass. But maybe that's good enough for her. So, good question. With their relationship, but it kind of is you haven't proven yourself to me, so I'm not going to be helping you first.
Okay, gotcha.
What about you?
I don't know. I thought in the moment when Tada got the payphone, even before the payphone, got the phone call from Odin and said, help me out, and he was like, nah. I'm like, cool. But then later on with the payphone thing, was like, you really got to come because Wednesday is not in good shape. And he was like, I'll get back to you. I was like, I wonder if that's the right move. So I'm on the fence. I think I would stay with Bilquis if I was Shadow, but even I'm not sure of my own decisions. Ever.
I feel it might literally be in the moment how you're feeling. It's just one of those like, it could go either way. We're going to find out how it goes down. That's for sure. I loved the tie-in. I thought it was really interesting with Ms. World. how that is tying into what Bilquis is doing, because I kind of was wondering how would that intersect. Like, how are these, you're doing your own circle and they're doing their own circle. Oh, wait, your stuff overlaps because they're using that tech of this company, and then Bilquis is essentially messing with it, and so they can't have that. And I thought it was really interesting for Ms. World to figure out it's Bilquis, and was not happy about it. And then, of course, if you got to get anything done, you got to be a white man, so switches to that to go get stuff done.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel well if I did. Well, Crispin Glover's always amazing. I'm glad you're back for a second, but I was kind of like, why is he? Oh.
I loved having him back too. I thought he did a great job, but it really felt all right, fine, he has to go get something done. It's, but it makes sense if a white man showed up to wherever this is, but he changes his appearance anyway. So part of me was like, well, what does it matter? Because then changes to that other guy, the other employee to get in. So what's it matter? But I got it as if a black woman showed up somewhere, it wouldn't necessarily get the same effect as if it was this white dude.
Man, this show is American AF.
Right? You're like, that's probably what would go down. Yes. So I thought that was really interesting. And then how they talk, and let's try to figure out an agreement, and talks about a direct interface to the gods, which makes me really apprehensive. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are we talking here?
What does prayer look like in 2021, or the open channels?
Right?
I'm interested. Because I know last season there was that network, and that did not work out. So I wonder how it's going to be presented. But yeah, I would love to see what that looks like in a modern space.
Now, what did you think of the essentially discussion they were having of like some kind of agreement? Do you think Bilquis understood via World that don't mess with this guy? Because it seemed like they had already talked about, like, okay, don't mess with him. But I'm like, really? They had this discussion ahead of time? But I guess that makes sense of like, I just didn't feel that Ms. Mr. It's both, depending on who we're talking to at the time. Right. But how World is talking to Bilquis, like, I didn't feel they were communicating that much. I was a little bit surprised when it was like, oh, by the way, remember we said don't mess with that guy because we need this company.
It did seem like in the early episodes that Bilquis was a target for a mission for everyone else. Like, why? Yeah. Bring her to me, like very 1980s cartoon. So it was kind of like a weird thing, but like at the same time, all the other characters that were introduced in the first episode between Bilquis and World were kind of like forgotten about. So I guess it's kind of like a shorthand in that way, where it's like, we sent you messengers that tell you this, as opposed to be like, oh, we had dinner, we discussed it. What's wrong with you?
It's like those shows. It's like, hey, remember that time we did this thing, and then they talk about it, and you never actually see it. But that's the way to tell you it happened. You go, oh, right.
Yeah. Totally.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then, speaking about Wednesday, we figure out, which I was super suspicious of this caretaker lawyer guy, and I'm kind of glad to know he is screwing over the patients and taking their money, because I did you have suspicion about him at all?
Well, I never saw a conservator like that in any kind of media. So I'm always like, I don't know what he's up to. So I'm just like cynical. I don't know. He could have been seen at church, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's totally not a good thing that he's doing this to the patients, but it makes sense to our suspicion. We're like, I knew it. So go hackers for figuring that out. Go Claudia. And yes, we had the shadow. And so the other thing, which got really interesting, we got Wednesday and Johan. So did you feel something else was up with Johan? Because he had the distorted, and I don't want to say like demonic, but per like our sounds that we do in movies and TV, it's like more the demonic voice, but like on closed caption it said distorted voice. So it made me think something else was going on more with Johan, that he wasn't a normal, like regular human. Did you notice that, or did you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really thought that he was somebody that like sacrificed a little bit more. I'm not sorry, demigod status or like high priest kind of thing, but almost like a capo kind of character. Because even Wednesday is like, get a new band. Like, it was his mission to get one, so like he wouldn't do that to anyone. So I figured he had a little bit more of the juice.
That makes sense. Maybe he's like essentially a high priest status, like you were saying, that like you got to bring the worshipers. But apparently, so do you think he killed his bandmates? Like, gone in a drunken stupor and killed his bandmates?
It's hard to say because looking at him, like, oh yeah, he did it. But he was so adamant about not doing it that like he was in a situation where if he would have admitted it, Odin would have like, well, it happens. Just get someone new. Like, he was already over it. But the fact he took the time to say, no, it wasn't me, and how dare you? I think there's actually going to be a mystery afoot.
Actually, that fits well with the idea of his statement of like, I'm praying to the god and the god's chair is empty. So I think that makes sense in terms of if he didn't kill his bandmates, he tells his god this didn't happen, and his god doesn't seem to do anything for him. Of course he would be upset, and then thus blows up the bar, which is like, oh shit. And that really sucks for all the other people there. And you're like,
that sucks.
What?
It sucks.
I mean, I feel that's definitely, there's no words to really describe it, but I just feel it's really just like, well,
yeah,
darn. Wednesday getting naked was amusing. Of like, what is he doing?
Well, this TVMA, huh?
Well, I appreciated how they did. Actually, speaking of nudity, sidebar on that. One, I thought it was interesting how they did implied nudity. Like, this is an actor who he's been working a long time, so it makes sense that he wouldn't necessarily be like, all right, I want to show my junk. But they like had it imply. It was enough implied nudity that we, the viewer, like, oh my goodness, Odin's naked. But we don't ever have to see the details. I think maybe when he's walking away down the street, maybe you get a little bit of butt, like a little bit at the bottom of the cheeks. But he could have underwear on that they pulled up or something like that. But I appreciated that they made it feel like he was naked, but the actor didn't have to. Which, speaking on that, I thought it was interesting for Laura too, that now she's to implied nudity, and it is an actor's choice what they want to show. But I just noticed that before she had been like, whatever, here's everything, and now it was like, let me strategically.
Yeah, it was very Vanity Fair. Like, you came back from the dead pretty glammed up, girl. Like, I get it, but I actually, now that you mention it, it is kind of a more of a applied thing. But doing that underscores the female Foreman Bilquist a lot more because she was topless when she had that scene with the Simmons.
So I'm just curious I'd have to go look and see. Let me know if anybody else noticed that or cared. And it's one of those, it's not really a big deal at all. It's just one of those like, oh, that's interesting. Because I thought her posing was very pretty in the cemetery, in the mausoleum space. But it was kind of like, oh, I wonder if she got to that point where she's like, I don't really want to anymore. And then that's fine. Yeah. But if anybody's seen anything on that, let me know. Which
is a sharp contrast to last week's episode with her dad's many conquests, all topless.
Yes. So we'll see. Again, actors can also change their opinion on what they want to show or not. It's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
So then I feel that's everybody. Was there anything else in the episode that we didn't touch upon that stood out to you?
No, I think it's more of a holding pattern, almost like a sequel to episode 3. And it was a serviceable episode, but I'm hoping episode 5 we get some really good not battles, maybe physically, but really good clashes between some of these storylines, have to see them come together. And what about Lakeside? What's going on with that?
We did put a pause on Lakeside. And actually, wait, another thing I just thought of. What did you think about how it made it sound like World was saying how it almost sounded like World didn't want a war at all. And it felt if people were on the new god side, old gods would back off and then the war wouldn't happen. And I was like, well, that's an interesting stance to take because I felt World still wanted to. It does seem like World would rather avoid the fighting altogether, but wants to be the higher power. So it's like, well, I don't know if you could claim that higher status without the fight is the problem.
Yeah, it's a different kind of thing. The old gods have this like sword and shield, go to war. And on the other side, the new gods want to do it as silently, as cybernetically as possible, but they know they just can't slip behind an analog like battle axe. So I think the actual fighting part's secondary, and that's why it's kind of like they're willing to wait and try these other harebrained schemes that always fall apart first.
Yeah. Well, I get, like you said, it's a holding pattern. We'll have to wait and see. I like that it felt like a tie-in to next episode / post-credit scene of Laura getting to Cairo of like what's going on. Mm-hmm. I still want to call it Cairo. Cairo.
We can.
It's Cairo in a way. Of her getting there and like, where's Wednesday? So I'm curious on her plans. And I was like, oh, let's see what happens next. I agree. And especially now that she's human.
Yeah.
And what that means. Cool. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching. Leave comments down below what you thought of the episode and any other commentary you felt about what went down in this episode and what may be to come. Now, Flobo, where can people find you online?
You can follow me on social media at Flobo Boyce right here. And learn more about the shows that I'm working on at newamsterdam.com. That's KNEW Amsterdam.com.
There you go. I'm like, and then I'm like, whew, I'm going into the digital realm. It's like, yeah. I'm like, where? Yeah, there we go, this way. And you can find me online at Kari D Lane on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the things. And you're here on YouTube. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe as well. And also, if you're a Sword Art Online fan, anime fan, I have a lot of episodes covering that show with voice actors as well. And over on my Instagram, I have full-on hour interviews with voice actors. So if that's something you're into, go check that out as well as blah, 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 unboxings too, and show off candy. So yay!
Are you sub or dub?
I am totally sub.
Nice.
But I appreciate dub so much, and one is not better than the other. Nope. It is personal preference, everybody. We talk about this on a lot of things. What about you, Flobo?
What little anime I've seen, I appreciate subs. Because you get to see like the actual emotion to the actual animation, but that's just me. I am a noob.
No, I full disclosure of all the shows I generally cover, it's all the dub, and I'm talking to the dub actors, so I watch that as well. But I generally prefer. But I'm also interested in like learning Japanese, so then that's also why I appreciate it as well. Wow. But I do like that dub opens it up to way more people and is essentially a gateway drug for people to get into anime because. Sometimes reading, people don't like it, but I watch American Gods with subtitles on too. So I watch subtitles on everything.
Same here, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you everybody so much for watching and tune in for next week and we'll see you later. Bye.